Hello, everybody. We are here with Chris Glatis. He is the author of When Your Mind Screams. It's a book he wrote about his journey with anxiety, and I know it's going to hit home for a lot of the writers and creatives on my list because we all feel anxiety to some extent, and Chris has grappled with like big boss level anxiety. Welcome, Chris. Good to see you.
Yeah, man, it's great to be here, Brooks. I really appreciate this. I'm excited to dive in.
Excellent. So Chris is a writer director, and he's written a ton of screenplays. He and I have known each other for a long time. He's awesome, and I'm so excited for you about this book. Let's jump in right away and give the people listening some really interesting, actionable ideas. Like because you have the book structured in a way that I think is going to hit home for people who are serious about storytelling. Give us an overview of how it's structured.
Yeah, I mean, look, the book was being a creative. I wanted to structure. I was like, how am I going to structure this book? And I started to look what I do, writing screenplays for the most part, and how the screenplay is set up traditionally, right? Three acts, which you know all about. The setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. And we are writing our own stories of our own life as we move through life, right? And so I just thought it would be a great way to have those three sections, and they're married to like the setup would be breathe, right? You have before
So
you do
hold on. So in your book, it's breathe is the first part, confrontation is the second part, resolution is the third part, right?
it's so setup, confrontation, resolution, the screenplay. The My book is set up. Breathe would be the first, would be set up. Observe would be the confrontation, and then let go would be the resolution.
Got it.
Um, so those are the three sections, and the first third of the book is about breathing and just landing. Right? We can't we can't really figure out what's going on or why it's going on unless we stop, unless we pause, unless we breathe, right? I'm sitting at my desk all day long writing, and I can tell when I'm not breathing. I mean, I could just be writing something, I'm a little bit scared to write it or whatever, and I hold my breath. So if you shut your eyes, if you just stop everything, all outside input, and just breathe, you're able to land, get in your body, and then take the next step forward, right?
Awesome.
But
So step one is breathe in your book, and for screenwriters, that's act one, right? Boom.
exactly,
And
exactly.
and then two in your book is observe, you're saying, right?
That would be observed, and that gets into a lot of detail. But what I will say is that it's a lot of writers. Writers write, and I don't know if you have a journaling practice, but I journal. I do it every morning, whether it's morning pages or a 5 minute journal. I'm able to understand. It's basically taking the windshield wipers and clearing out your mind for the day, right? I can get everything out in front of me, right? Once I've settled down and I breathe, I can observe what's going on in my mind, observe what's going on in my body. What am I feeling in my body right now? Like, is it tense here? Is it tense? Where is it tense? So the ability, and again, I get into more detail, but the ability to really understand where I say that ticker tape that's going through your mind. Like, how are you talking to yourself? What are you saying to yourself? Because ultimately it's not the anxiety, it's how you respond to it, right? You could have something in your life happen, gets you anxious, but it's not really the anxiety, it's what you're telling yourself about it and how you respond to it.
Awesome. Okay, so breathe is step one for your book. Observe is step two, and that's similar to act one and act two of a screenplay. And then in act three, the big climax, what's the equivalent in your book for act three?
So resolution would be equated to letting go, right? There is a most of the time with anxious individuals, we're trying to control everything because we don't want to feel certain things, specifically fear, panic, right? So there's a holding on to everything. There's a scheduling your day and just making sure everything goes the same way every day, so it makes you feel safe. But ultimately it's not making you safe. It's making you're getting comfortable in your comfort zone, as I say. So there's a letting go of outcome. There's a letting go. So you're practicing these things and not going at the end of when I'm breathing. I'm not. Do I feel less anxious right now? Do I feel less anxious? It's a letting go and letting life move through you, right? It's it's an allowing of everything, of what you're feeling in your body, the ticker tape going on in your head, but you're watching it, right? You're not buying into it. So and that section gets a little bit esoteric with some other things, but ultimately that's the simple message.
Awesome. That's great. So yeah, it's what I really love that. And I know you've been a seeker your whole life, all sorts of different modalities. But like, it's I'm so excited for you to kind of put into all those insights that you've from facing these challenges yourself about anxiety, to be able to put them into a book that's really helps people with context and some really actionable ideas on how they can deal with anxiety in their own life. And it's actually available right now. It's already a bestseller on Amazon right now, right? It's on the bestseller list.
Yeah, I just found out, which is really exciting. Really
That's
exciting.
awesome. So, and you can get it for like the next, I don't know, 5, 6 days for $1 still. It's like you have discount to start it off.
The Kindle is available for 99 cents for an entire week. So
Awesome. So yeah, so people can jump on it right away if they're interested in this sort of thing. Uh let's go back to, can you give us a few, because you got some really interesting anecdotes in the book. Can you share one anecdote that feels exciting for you in terms of when you first started realizing you were struggling with anxiety in a really significant way, like back early on in your life?
yeah, I think it started literally right when I went from high school to college and feeling really uncertain about my life, what I was doing, obviously having all these feelings that I didn't even know what they were. I mean, I didn't even know the five major feelings until I was an adult. So if you can't understand what you're feeling, how can you take the step forward? There's
Quick
no manual.
refresher: five major feelings: joy, sadness, fear, anger, and shame. Right? That's how
Right,
you feel. Yeah.
right. And all the other ones kind of come out of those.
Variations of them. Yeah, those are the
Um,
primary ones.
yeah, so it was then, and then you hear about separation anxiety and all these things. And but it was, I think what happened is this had been building, 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 building. I wasn't breathing, I wasn't observing anything, and I was holding on to dear life. So I was doing everything that's opposite to what I say in this book. And then it hit a boiling point, and I think going to college was that separation that just everything kind of exploded for me. You know.
And were you having full blown panic attacks or close? Or how did that work?
Yeah, so now I haven't had an actual panic attack in a long time. So what was happening then was, you're right, it was more full-blown panic, and then in between it was, I was okay. So these things were just coming out of nowhere, and that kind of morphed into more generalized anxiety, just kind of feeling anxious kind of all day long.
Yeah. And so then what? So you realized it. Was there any sort of clinical diagnosis for you early on, or how
Yeah.
was that side of things?
Yeah, so in the book I get pretty personal about about my how I grew up, and some of the triggers and traumas that I had, that I think that planted the seeds for all this, right? So I did go to I was at a point where I got to get help. I wasn't necessarily getting it from my primary caregiver, so I went and saw a psychiatrist, and he immediately said, he diagnosed me with panic disorder, which, as strange as it may sound, I was relieved. I was like, oh my God, there's a name for this. Other people have it. It's not this horrible thing. And so, I also don't think diagnoses and labels are the greatest thing either. That was way back when. Things have changed now, and I think I want people to know that they're not broken, and this is just something. I mean, if you break your arm, you're going to go to a doctor, right? So if your mind's hurting, you're going to see a psychiatrist, and at least get pointed in the right direction.
Yeah. So some psychiatry, and then you were also involved in a bunch of different modalities of personal growth too. I mean, you and I met in a men's group, but I know you've done like me all sorts of things. What are the top? So you started out with some support from psychiatry. What are two or three other most exciting or interesting ways that you've explored your anxiety as a creator? Like, what are the more interesting modalities?
Well, the I think that first of all, what I try to do with this book is, I have tried so many things, and they've all been helpful in their different ways.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was commonalities between all of them. And since anxiety, it I think as someone who struggles with anxiety, I try to complicate things, right? And
Yeah.
so if you write or read something that's complicated, it's just going to make the person more anxious. So I tried to say, out of all these modalities, men's group, some psychedelic therapy, couples therapy, singles therapy, trauma therapy.
Meditation. You did intensely
Oh, a
meditation.
lot of meditation.
But like you did like how long did you do a silent retreat once? Was that a week
I
or
think it was like
weeks?
3 to 5 days. Yeah, that
Okay.
was incredibly challenging. But what I realized was there was like these three things that they were all kind of coming, all of them landed on that and thought, and it was the basis for all these different modalities. So I was like, well, that's great. Like, let's make this simple. Let's make the book simple. So, because sometimes the simplest things are the hardest for us to do, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so that's how I kind of structured the book, even though, so I've kind of went out and done all these things, and not to say that people can't do all those things, but hopefully I've done that for them now to say, this is what you need to do. You don't need to do all these things,
Yeah,
right?
you've helped people to kind of streamline that exploration,
Right, right.
and or at least if they're gonna explore anything that feels good to them, they'll get your perspective on why you think this modality was most helpful for you. So you kind of cut down the sort of trial and error process for people.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
that's
exactly.
awesome. That's awesome. I really like that. So two more questions for you, my friend. One is Steve Pressfield gave you a recommendation for the book. He's known for he's one of the best, one of the most prominent sort of personal growth oriented professional screenwriters. Look, there's always been screenwriting gurus, but he was one of the first people to kind of really talk about the sort of the mindset approach to the game with the War of Art and other stuff. Um, what was that like? Sort of getting his blessing, for this sort of book, and and why do you think he was drawn to sort of supporting it?
Yeah, well, Steven's an amazing, amazing guy. I'm sure a lot of the people that follow you have read The War of Art. And interestingly enough, when I started writing my book, I wanted to have a similar kind of structure, at least initially, where you could just flip to any page in the book and get something. They're really short chapters, bite-sized, most of them. And so, he was a real mentor of mine in leaning into resistance, right? And when I started following him and listening to him, I know in reading, he's got this thing called Writing Wednesdays where he just talks about writing, and it's his blog. And he was talking about his struggles with anxiety and how every day is sometimes kind of a bitch to wake up and put the pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard. And so when I knew that he had struggled with anxiety, and I also know that he's a creative and that he's created this wonderful book about resistance, I'm like, I got to reach out. I got to bust through my resistance to reach out to him.
Yeah,
And so I did that. He was unbelievably kind. We have just a lot of banter back and forth. This was even before the book. I had a little bit. I had an intro to him and I had a little back and forth with him. So I had a little bit of an on ramp, to kind of say, hey, I'm writing a book about anxiety. I know that you struggle with it. And I know that creatives struggle with it. I'd love to have you check it out. And if you think it's something worthwhile, give it a stamp of approval. So it was really the
yeah,
stars aligned.
yeah. It's awesome. And somebody like him gets hit up all the time for that sort of thing. And and it wasn't like you guys were best friends. You knew each other a little bit, so
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was really really exciting, and no surprise to me. But I was really happy for you. So actually, two more questions. I know I said two before, but
sure.
there's going to be because you know my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more of an expert about this than me, is everybody experiences anxiety to some extent or another, right? So there's a gradation, there's a scale of sort of like one being like the Zen master or what maybe, and then 100 being somebody who's like got super severe, like like really can't manage anything, sort of like is your does this book help people sort of anywhere along the lines? Does it have a sweet spot in terms of where it's most helpful for people? And if you feel comfortable, where would you put yourself on that scale of 1 to 100?
Yeah, look, I mean, just going back to Stephen Pressfield, when he wrote that book, he wrote it for creatives, right? He wrote it for writers, really.
Yeah.
But as you know, it went into all sorts of art, sports, business. There's tons of crossover. I think that this could help anyone. I mean, I think that just these, if you have no anxiety and you do these three things, it's gonna, these three things that we mentioned, it's gonna help out your life tremendously.
Yeah.
And I think that my goal initially was to write it for people who, when I started getting anxiety when I was younger, it was all clinical books, it was all PhDs, it was all doctors. It was very clinical, hard to get my head around, and it wasn't really practical. I really couldn't utilize anything. And the thing that I hammer home over and over again in this book is it's about leaning in. It's about dancing with this anxiety. It's not about managing it, and it's not about running away from it. But anyone who struggles with any emotion, sadness, whatever it may be, these principles would work with all of those, I think. You know, as far as where I'm on this, it depends on the day, right? I mean, I mean, you know me pretty well, and I've had some bad days and have had fantastic days. But I think that the cool thing is I have a lot of information. I have these practices. It's nowhere near what it was when I was younger, right?
Yeah.
Now I use it as a marker of, if it's scary or I have fear, I think I need to walk towards it, not away from it.
Yeah.
But in the past, it was like, I need to feel better. I need to get away from it. So I think that even though, I write in the book, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a celebrity, I'm not these things. I do think I'm an expert because I've been dealing with this for a long
Of course.
time, and it works for me. And I assume if it works for me, it's going to work for someone else.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And I think that's really smart. I mean, I like to kind of keep things clean and simple, but that's, I think, a really instructive and nuanced answer days, one day is different than the next, even the beginning of the day, end of the day. And what we're really looking for in life is sort of a tendency and a sustainability of a way of doing it. It's probably not going to be perfect Zen master type. Even the Zen master probably isn't always at like, where it's like
Right. Well,
there's that flow.
the other thing I want to say is that, and again, this is just my opinion. The whole book is just my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think that, I write right in the beginning of the book that the anxiety, it never really goes away, right? Even if you don't have anxiety, like I struggle with, it's gonna come up throughout your life. But I hear it frequently. Oh, it just vanished, it's gone. And I'm not saying that can't happen, but I think that if you're setting yourself up for disappointment, if you
Yeah.
think that just all gonna go away, it's a, how do you dance with it? How do you lean into it? How do you use it as fuel, right? I mean, that's what I think I've done in my life. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have gone down all these paths to explore myself, right?
That's right.
And I'm a much better person because of the anxiety, right?
That's
So,
right. This was your particular unfolding of your soul. Like the
right,
adversity that you faced led you to these responses. And that's what we do with our protagonist. The protagonist faces the exact challenges
absolutely.
and forces of antagonism they need to become the hero that they can be at the end. That's what you've done with this book. So I love that.
That,
Okay. Oh, you go.
I was just going to say that's an amazing point because, again, we're taught in screenwriting to throw everything at our protagonist. Like, even when you think you've thrown everything,
Yeah.
throw more,
Yeah.
make it impossible, because that is going to make that individual grow, and it's also going to make an more interesting story.
Because that's how life feels for us. That's so
Right.
overwhelming, and then even more, right? Okay, last question for real. If people take one thing away from this book, they read it, and you hope they get one darn thing, what would that be?
I probably already covered some of it, but I think that, at least initially, know you're not broken. Everyone's struggling on some level. Everyone is struggling on some
Yeah,
level, and there is a way out.
yeah.
There is a way
That's
through.
two things.
Yeah, that was that was part of it.
Well, but because of the one there's two. But no, that was what occurred to me too. Is that what I think might be the most exciting thing for me about this and the book, and everybody's going to read it, is just that, oh, um, yeah, I'm not as alone, as isolated as I thought. It really is more normal and more acceptable. And what a gift, man. Thank you so much for writing it and sharing it. I'm so happy for you and happy for everybody that reads it, because there really are gonna just see themselves in a way that, oh, maybe not too many people consciously walk around thinking they're broken, but subconsciously almost everybody does, right? So I think this is going to soften those voices in a really beautiful way. What a gift. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank you for the title of the book, because Brooks actually came up, just threw it out one day, and I'm like, it sticks, it works, because that's what it feels like someday. It feels like your mind is screaming. So
Yeah.
thank you for this time, and yeah, I hope people pick up the book. Like you said, Amazon, Kindle is 99 cents for a week, and then and if they don't like Kindles, the obviously the hardback and the paperback are available as well.
Awesome. Chris, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you, brother.